Talofa lava, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susana Suisuiki. Coming up.
So if you haven't resided in Samoa, you cannot register for the next general election.
Samoa amends its electoral laws. Also,
there aren't as many Pasifika role models in construction as we'd like.
Thinking of a future in trades? Well, New Zealanders hoping more Pasifika people take up apprenticeships. And we check out some of the sporting events happening across the Pacific. Samoa's electoral laws have been amended, giving citizens the right to register to vote from overseas. The amendments to Samoa's Electoral Amendment Bill 2024 was passed on Friday morning by Samoa's Parliament in Apia. There were concerns the amendments would result in Samoa's diaspora influencing general elections. However, Electoral Commissioner Tuiaferolo John Stanley has dismissed those concerns. He told RNZ Pacific conditions were in place to ensure Samoa's future was decided by Samoan citizens who have resided in the country. Whina Whanua spoke with Tuiaferolo.
It's an amendment to the current legislation that we have, Electoral Law of 2019, and there were only two specific amendments that we submitted, which is approved by Parliament. The amendment that opens up the online registration in the current law.
Yes.
It has online registration, but only people who are living in Samoa. And the amendment now is opening it up to anybody, whether you're in Samoa or you're overseas. You are able to apply for registration online. And that registration can only be completed if you come to Samoa and complete it by doing your biometrics. And that will complete your registration, and your name will be entered into the electoral roll for the next general election in 2026. That's the first amendment. The second amendment is to allow the Office of the Commission to do re-registration if required every 10 years. And that's the only two amendments that we took for Parliament today.
There's been concerns that this would allow the Samoan diaspora to influence the election more than Samoans who live locally. What's your opinion on those concerns?
Well, this is only for registration, but there are requirements under the law, qualifications for you to be registered. And the qualification is to be a Samoan citizen, you're 21 years and over, and thirdly, you have resided in Samoa. So if you haven't resided in Samoa at the moment, according to the law, you cannot register for the next general election.
How long does someone have to reside in Samoa?
With the current law, if you haven't resided in Samoa, but at least you've been here for 6 months before the general election.
Was there much opposition in Parliament towards this bill?
Well, most of the concern is because, like I said, the residency is a considering factor. And by most of the concerns, I believe they haven't read the law, the current law. But like I said, if you haven't resided in Samoa, you cannot register.
And what prompted this bill?
Okay, well, the amendment was initiated by our office, my office, of the Electoral Commission. Like we said, the current law is, with the online registration, is only for people living in Samoa. And we have requested Cabinet, and that was approved by Cabinet, to do that amendment, to open it up to anybody, or any Samoan citizen who lives overseas or in Samoa. You are able to apply for registration online. But like I said, there are requirements, there are documentation that you have to provide to confirm, evidence to confirm your birth. You're 21 and over, and you have a Samoan citizen.
You said the elections are a year from now. Could you describe the progress in organizing the elections? Are there any challenges so far?
Well, the biggest challenge is to make sure our electoral rolls are accurate and credible, and we make sure that they have the integrity. If we don't have our electoral rolls accurate, and that would be a big problem. So that's the first step we're working towards, and it takes 18 months for us to do it. before the electoral roll will close at the beginning of October 2025, according to the law.
There are a lot of Samoans having to work overseas and who have to live overseas. Does this new law make it? Is it what was the compelling objective? Was it to make it more inclusive for Samoans who are in that situation?
Yeah, exactly. You're quite correct. That's the whole idea. To make sure we consider all avenues for any Samoa who is eligible to vote, to be able to vote. And this is the first time we have developed our online portal on our website. But before we didn't have it. You have to email your details if you're living overseas or whatever. But now we have, with the new system we have developed a portal so you can apply online. You fill in your application online and submit your documentation, and the office will assess it. Then once that process has been completed, that's the first part of it, then we will advise you have to come here in the next 18 months to do your biometrics, and that will complete the whole process.
New Zealand's building sector wants more Pasifika taking up apprenticeships. The Building and Construction Industry Training Organisation wants more Pasifika to enrol. Director Greg Durkin told Don Wiseman that while there are many Pasifika working as labourers in the sector, they are underrepresented when it comes to qualifications.
I think a lot of people join the construction industry, particularly Pasifika people who are coming into labouring roles, and we know from our research that they're not, or some are, but a lot are not progressing into apprenticeships. I think there's a number of reasons for that. But first of all, the apprenticeships for us, particularly in construction, serve as a really great way of opening up really great careers in the industry for people. And often that leads to supervisor roles, management roles, in many cases ownership of their own business. I think with Pasifika people, one of the things that we have identified is that it's very difficult to be what you can't see. And there aren't as many role models, there aren't as many Pasifika role models in construction as we'd like. So one of the things that we're doing about that at the moment is we've been profiling some successful people, Pasifika people in the industry, and we're just posting those up on our website at the moment. We've got an example of a current apprentice, a current tradesperson, a current business owner, all people who have entered construction and have gone on to be successful in those endeavours.
Just clarify what sort of apprenticeships we're talking about here, covering what areas of construction.
I think the main one, Don, is carpentry. That's probably the most common one, but there's also a range of others. Concrete construction apprenticeship, which is typically one if you're involved in a lot of commercial work, because we do favour concrete construction in Aotearoa. But there's also timber joinery, flooring, painting, brick and block, plastering. There's a whole range of, frame and truss. There's a whole range of different occupations. We look after 16 industries in the construction industry, and all of them have employers who are looking for talented people. So there's some great opportunities.
Yes. Well, putting some things up on your website is probably all very well, but you're going to have to do a lot more than that, it would seem.
Oh, absolutely. And we're in schools all the time. BCITO as an organisation has had a long-standing relationship with secondary schools, and we've got specific programs to encourage people to consider careers in construction, and we do a lot of work in Auckland, which is where we have a lot of Pasifika people, families. But I think one of the things that we have specifically started to do is what we call the Trade Secrets evenings for Pasifika, and I'll give you an example. One of those that we hosted late last year in Porirua, it was really successful. So they're run by our own staff, our Pasifika staff. We invite families, to come along with young people who might be still at school considering a career in construction. They come along, mum, dad and whomever else wants to come and they get to ask questions about what does this career look like? What does this apprenticeship look like? What does it involve and what are my opportunities? And I think that's a great way of our staff connecting with Pasifika communities because those are the communities that they're from in many cases. So that's working really well.
Just remind me what it costs, or does it cost anything for someone to become an apprentice, or are they just, like in the old days, you would be paid a wage, but it would be relatively lower because you're spending time at tech and so on and so on. Then it went all tech, but it's changed back again, hasn't it? So now, what sort of money would you earn as an apprentice carpenter?
Oh, it varies a lot, but our employers are reasonably fair about salaries. Obviously, when you first start out, you're not on the higher salary, of course, but our employers are very mindful of the fact that our apprentices need to live and pay rent and look after their families if they're family people. So I think that's first and foremost. I think employers are conscious of the fact that in order to attract talented people, they need to be an employer of choice. Yes, there are fees. The fees are very modest in comparison to a full-time study because the majority of study that you do as an apprentice is in the workplace. So some of our apprenticeships have block courses, about half of them, but those courses are normally quite short, 1 or 2 weeks a year. So there isn't the same level of going away to long block courses as you might have had a few years ago.
The third round of the Super Rugby Pacific competition is on this weekend, where the Fijian Drua will be battling the Crusaders in Fiji, with both teams still looking for their first win. Moana Pasifika will be fighting to get a second win as they take on the Melbourne Rebels. Our senior sports journalist, Eliesa Tora, joins me for our weekly Pasifika Sporti Talanoa. Pula Eliesa, big weekend for the Fijian Drua and Crusaders tomorrow. What will the teams need to do to win their first Super Rugby game in 2024?
Yes, definitely. The Fijian Drua and the Crusaders will need to win this weekend's third round of the Super Rugby Pacific Series. The Drua is hosting the defending champions in Lautoka on Saturday. 2 rounds without any wins, and they now square off against each other. Definitely will be a lot of pressure on both teams. The Drua playing at home in their first home match of the season, and will be needing a win to kickstart their home series, which have 7 lined up this year. And the Crusaders, having lost to the Chiefs and then the Waratahs in both away matches, will go into their third away match this weekend, and they will also be looking for that win for the 2024 season. They've both named strong lineups, and expecting the Crusaders to turn up the heat. One of the thing going for the Drua probably is the home fan base. Quite a big home fan base in Lautoka over the past 2 years. We have seen that, and of course playing at 1 o'clock Fiji time, 2 o'clock here. That will be in the heat, and it'll be interesting to see how the Crusaders live up to that, being able to take on the home fans and the heat. I definitely think it will be a close game. The end result would depend on which team is still running in the last quarter.
Moana Pasifika hosts the Rebels of Melbourne and Hamilton. How do you think that clash will go?
Definitely an interesting game also for Moana Pasifika, who will be looking to record their second win in the competition this year after they defeated the Drua last weekend. Head coach Whalongo Tana Umanga has made some changes in his backline, and he said that he expects the lineup that he has got, despite some injuries to some of the key players who missed last weekend's game, he's still confident that the team that has been selected will be able to get the job done against the Rebels. The Rebels, of course, fighting to keep afloat. They have an uncertain future ahead of them as far as the franchise is concerned, financial-wise. But definitely, that should be an exciting game again. But Moana Pasifika if they do what they did against the Ndrua last weekend in Melbourne, they should be able to come home with their second win in the season. But of course, they will need to keep consistently going in the full 80 minutes of the game.
Lots of news coming out of the Rugby House in Suva. Can you give us an update on the latest with Fiji Rugby?
Yes, Fiji Rugby has been in the limelight over the past few weeks. Two things, of course, happening. First, Ben Gollings, the coach of the Sevens team, has gone 19 tournaments in the World Rugby 7 Series without a title win, and that has irked a lot of calls from local fans, even Prime Minister Siti Rambuka joining in the bandwagon at the weekend, calling for decisions to be made. And the Fiji Rugby Union last night gave Ben Gollings the boot. They've sacked Ben Gollings as coach. They've taken on Osea Kolinisau, who was the captain of the Fiji Sevens team for a number of years, including the first Olympic gold medal win in 2016, where Kolinisau was captain. He is now the new Sevens coach to take Fiji towards the Olympic Games, which Fiji will be defending in July in France. The second thing that Fiji Rugby fans are waiting for is the naming of the Flying Fijians head coach. RNZ Pasifika has been told that Attorney General Siromi Turanga had told FRU last week to follow the rules, Immigration Act in Fiji, which says that the understudy should be given the job once he has gone through the period that he was supposed to be understudy with, and Servakula, one of the two who had been shortlisted, interviewed, and in the running for the Flying Fijians head coach, is awaiting decision from Fiji Rugby. And Peter Meiji, chairman of the Fiji Rugby Union Trust Board, has said that the decision of the Flying Fijians head coach should be made in a week or two. But Ben Gollings has been sacked, and Osea Kolinisau takes over as the new Fiji Sevens coach, going towards the Olympic Games, in July in France.
And I'm sure we'll have more on that later on. Oceania Football have some tournaments coming up. What is the updates on that?
Yes, definitely a lot of football happening over the next few months, with OFC having drawn pools for the OFC Under-19 men's football qualifying tournament. Will be held in Vanuatu from April 9 to the 15th. Women's Under-16 will be held in Auckland, New Zealand from June 14th to the 20th. And the OFC Futsal Men's Champions League will be held in New Caledonia on April 23rd to the 28th. So three Oceania football competitions happening over the next few months, and interesting to see how these tournaments will play out and which teams will qualify to go into the FIFA tournaments. Of course, the Oceania tournaments are qualifiers for FIFA tournaments later on in the year, or towards 2025 and 2026.
Regional sports events this weekend around Pasifika. What are some of the highlights that we can look forward to?
Yes, certainly in Vanuatu football, the semi-finals of the EU-Born Marche ABM Cup will be held on Saturday in Port Vila. Some of Vanuatu's best football clubs will be playing in the semi-finals, including Inferior Blackbird, who played in the Oceania Club Championship in the last 2 years. In Papua New Guinea, the SPG PNG Hunters will be meeting Manly Seagulls in their opening host plus rugby league game on Saturday at the Santos National Football Stadium. Also in Fiji, another round of the Fiji Skippers Cup, Fiji Rugby Union Skippers Cup competition, which will feature men's, women competition in the different grades, and Fiji Football Association Premier League competition also continues with round 4 in Fiji over the weekend. Also archery in Vanuatu, which is something that is also building in the region. Vanuatu archery looking to put together competitions that they can have their local players play in as they get funding to be able to help develop the game in Vanuatu. So, of course, busy weekend again of sports across the region. You have Pasifika players playing in the Super Rugby competition and the National Rugby League competition also in Australia. So a lot of sports to look forward to, and we will be carrying results in our Pasifika 40 rep on Monday.
The Papua New Guinea government last week finally instituted measures to try and solve an ongoing crisis over the availability of fuel. Puma Energy, which has an almost monopoly control of the market, has been forced a number of times over the past year to announce that they're limiting supplies because they lack the foreign exchange to bring the fuel into the country. Meanwhile, it has now been publicly revealed that the Central Bank of PNG had last year asked police to investigate Puma for possible money laundering. Don Wiseman spoke to the Executive Director of the PNG Institute of National Affairs, Paul Barker, who says the primary cause of the issue is the lack of foreign exchange.
We've had restrictions on foreign exchange for a number of years, really since about 2016, and it's partly related to large government expenditure and budget deficits over a long period of time, so importing a lot of goods and services. And foreign exchange is not being stored in the PNG banking system. It's not being remitted onshore. And so although PNG exports far more than it imports, nevertheless, for rather extraordinarily, we don't have the foreign exchange available. And because the exchange rate is set rather than the free market exchange rate, it means that it doesn't automatically level out. And with the exchange rate determining the level of trade, of imports and of exports. So you end up with a scenario where the central bank and the banks are determining who gets the foreign exchange. So with limited amount of foreign exchange that is being released all the time, they have to prioritize. So it's prioritized for debt servicing by government. Fuel is a high priority, so it has for a long, long time been one of the biggest monthly recipients of foreign exchange. And then after that, there are other things like mobile phone, international phone, internet costs, and imported goods. And then bottom of the priority list is companies wanting to pay dividends overseas and things like that, which many of them haven't been able to do for many, many years. So it does get the largest sum because it is the dominant supplier of fuel, Puma Energy, which is a subsidiary of a big resources commodity trading company, Trafigura. But it does get the biggest slice. It brings in the fuel, some of which gets domestically refined, some of which also then gets re-exported after being refined, and that actually, again, provides a bit of extra foreign exchange for Puma. But the central bank has for some time been concerned over the amount that has had to go to this one company. And from early last year, they started suggesting that Puma wasn't being fully transparent with the transactions that they were making and that they were not fully recording the re-exports that were occurring of oil back out to Singapore and elsewhere.
My understanding is that the central bank has encouraged the police to undertake some criminal investigation into money laundering by this company.
Yes, they did, and they certainly released a letter that has got into the public eye just recently, but it was actually from early 2023, asking the police to proceed with investigations and potential criminal charges against Puma on money laundering. But again, the question is in terms of the legality or illegality. So they may have been doing something that was breaching the Central Banking Act, but whether those transfers of money that belonged to Puma actually was criminally negligent, as it were, or whether it was a civil offence is a bit debatable, because if they were transfer pricing, if they were not declaring amounts of money or transactions that would be subject to taxation, well, that would be in breach of the taxation legislation, which would be potentially a criminal act. But if it's actually in breach of the Central Banking Act and transferring when approvals haven't been made, there's some debate as to whether really that's a criminal or a civil case. So it's noted that the police haven't done any follow-up on that since then. They may have been investigating, but a year has passed and nothing has progressed. But certainly the central bank has been looking at company and its parent company and saying, oh, look, we do notice that in different countries around the world that there have been issues that have been raised with Puma and its parent company over transfers, and they've been examining whether that's been applicable in Papua New Guinea. And certainly, as I say, they do get a very large proportion. It's sometimes maybe up to half the foreign exchange for the month going out for fuel imports, and it's then not available for all the other users. So central banks certainly been probing, although they have also been stating that it's the commercial banks that have been blocking them rather than the central bank in accessing funds. In that case, it's actually the counterpart banks that the commercial banks have, like ANZ or BSP, with their counterpart banks overseas that provide the US dollars or other foreign exchange, who in themselves have been barring these transactions.
For the people of PNG, the motorists and the travellers everywhere in PNG, they need to have a lot more guarantee that there's going to be fuel available. So how does that all get itself sorted out? The government has called on the banks to sort out the quantity of foreign exchange available. Is that call actually going to come to anything?
Well, as you say, it's aviation has come to a standstill on occasions last year and this year. So all flights, domestic flights have ceased, some international flights as well. It's transport going up and down the Highlands Highway, so it's basically the lifeblood of much of the economy, with trucks that deliver food goods or take out export crops or minerals or whatever. So they're being disrupted. And then, of course, all the power plants, main power plants are mostly hydro, but the small centres have got diesel generators, and there are a lot of backup diesel generators all around the country as well, which are finding it really difficult to get fuel or adequate quantities of fuels. And it's because of this dominant part that Puma has had in the PNG supply chain, because they took over a virtual monopoly. It wasn't a formal monopoly, but it was the dominant player in PNG's supply chain for fuel all around the country. There are some other players, and some of them have come in and have been increasing their distribution, but nevertheless it has been the dominant player and certainly the exclusive player for aviation fuel. So it's been really disruptive, and trying to sort it out. Well, the government has been trying to intervene, and obviously the central bank has been following its issues. Clearly some sort of audit and ensuring that it's all transparent. Now, the central bank is indicating that they are now more satisfied. They have done some auditing, and they're now more satisfied with the situation. So we're hoping that will actually result in some resolution of the issue, because if it's not resolved, the government has been introducing some emergency powers to access the big fuel depots and to be able to, as it were, requisition other vessels to transport or help distribution. But if everything cannot be resolved, clearly the government would be wanting other suppliers to actually step into the market, and either using their own facilities or to be able to take over the Puma facilities, or even at the end of the day, to be able to buy out Puma facilities and engage to have competition involving others supplying the market.
That's Pacific Waves for today. To listen back, head over to rnzi.com/programs. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, to Whāsoi Fua.